On a cold, stormy night in small-town Ohio, a terrified mother called police claiming her 6-year-old son had vanished without a trace. Neighbors joined desperate searches through the rain, convinced a dangerous stranger had taken the little boy. But as detectives uncovered disturbing inconsistencies inside the family home, the heartbreaking truth became far darker than anyone imagined. The person everyone trusted most may have been hiding a devastating secret the entire time. The town of Ashford Ridge, Ohio, was the kind of place where people still waved from their porches and children rode bicycles until the streetlights flickered on. Quiet neighborhoods lined with maple trees stretched for blocks, and nearly everyone knew one another by name. In the center of that peaceful town lived 32-year-old Melissa Harper and her 6-year-old son, Noah. To neighbors, Melissa appeared calm, polite, and devoted to her child. She volunteered at school events, smiled during conversations at the grocery store, and often spoke proudly about Noah's bright imagination and love for toy trains. But behind the carefully maintained image of a perfect suburban life, tension had slowly been building inside the small blue house at the end of Willow Creek Lane. Melissa had once dreamed of becoming a successful interior designer in Chicago, but years earlier she had returned to Ohio after a difficult breakup and an unstable financial situation. Raising Noah alone became harder than she ever expected. Bills piled up on the kitchen counter, overdue notices appeared in the mailbox, and the pressure of maintaining appearances weighed heavily on her every day. Friends noticed that Melissa had become withdrawn over the years. She rarely attended gatherings anymore and often cancelled plans at the last minute. Still, no one imagined anything dangerous. To the outside world, she was simply a stressed single mother trying to survive difficult circumstances. Noah, meanwhile, was known throughout the neighborhood as a cheerful and energetic child. He loved dinosaurs, cartoons, and catching fireflies during warm summer evenings. Teachers described him as gentle and curious, the kind of student who asked endless questions about space and animals. He trusted people easily and had a habit of waving at strangers from the back seat of Melissa's aging sedan. Many evenings, neighbors heard his laughter echoing through the backyard while Melissa sat quietly on the porch staring into the distance. Some residents later remembered those moments clearly, saying there was often an unusual sadness in her expression, as though she carried a burden too heavy to explain. As autumn arrived, Melissa's financial problems worsened dramatically. Collection agencies called constantly, and rumors spread that she was close to losing the house. At the same time, she became increasingly isolated. She stopped answering messages from relatives and withdrew Noah from after-school activities, claiming she needed to simplify life. Several parents at Noah's elementary school found the change strange because Melissa had once been highly involved in school functions. One teacher even noticed Noah becoming quieter in class. When asked if everything was okay at home, he simply shrugged and said, "Mom gets upset a lot lately." Late one Friday evening, heavy rain swept across Ashford Ridge. Thunder rolled over the town while most families stayed indoors watching television or preparing for bed. Around 10:30 p.m., Melissa called emergency services in a panicked voice, claiming Noah had disappeared from their home. Officers arrived within minutes and found her standing barefoot on the front lawn, soaked by rain and trembling uncontrollably. She told investigators she had fallen asleep on the couch and awakened to discover the back door open and Noah gone. Her emotional plea immediately triggered a large search effort throughout the neighborhood. Police officers, firefighters, volunteers, and worried residents searched through the storm carrying flashlights across wooded trails, drainage ditches, and nearby parks. Flyers were printed overnight, and local news stations interrupted programming to report the disappearance of 6-year-old Noah Harper. The entire town became consumed by fear and concern. Parents locked doors early, children were kept indoors, and speculation spread rapidly. Some believed a stranger had taken Noah. Others suspected he may have wandered into the woods during the storm. Melissa appeared devastated during interviews, tearfully begging for her son's safe return while standing beside investigators during press briefings. But as detectives began carefully examining the timeline, small inconsistencies started to emerge. Officers noticed Melissa struggled to provide clear answers about the final hours before Noah disappeared. She repeated certain details almost exactly each time, while changing others completely. Investigators also found it unusual that Noah's rain boots and favorite jacket were still inside the house despite the severe weather outside. Experienced detectives quietly began questioning whether the disappearance scene matched the story being told. The following afternoon, search teams made a heartbreaking discovery near a shallow creek several miles outside town. Hidden beneath fallen branches and wet leaves, they found evidence that immediately shifted the investigation in a darker direction. Detectives secured the area while emergency vehicles blocked the narrow country road leading into the woods. News spread quickly through Ashford Ridge, and residents gathered silently behind police tape, fearing the worst. Meanwhile, investigators returned to Melissa's home with growing suspicion, determined to uncover what truly happened during the stormy night that had shattered the peaceful town forever. By Saturday evening, the atmosphere in Ashford Ridge had changed completely. What had begun as a desperate search for a missing child was now turning into a full criminal investigation. Police vehicles remained parked outside Melissa Harper's home, while detectives moved in and out carrying evidence boxes beneath the flashing blue lights. Reporters gathered near the edge of the neighborhood, speaking quietly into cameras as frightened residents watched from their windows. The entire town struggled to understand how a 6-year-old boy could vanish during a storm and be found under such disturbing circumstances less than 24 hours later. Inside the police department, investigators carefully reconstructed Melissa's timeline minute by minute. Detectives reviewed surveillance footage from nearby intersections, examined phone records, and interviewed neighbors repeatedly. At first glance, Melissa continued appearing cooperative. She cried during questioning, spoke softly about Noah's favorite toys, and insisted someone must have entered the house while she slept. But experienced investigators noticed that her emotions often seemed delayed, almost rehearsed. Certain details in her account did not match physical evidence collected from the home or the wooded area where Noah had been discovered. One detective, Daniel Reeves, had spent nearly 2 decades investigating major crimes across Ohio. Calm and observant, he believed the smallest inconsistencies often revealed the truth. While reviewing photographs from Melissa's kitchen, he noticed something unusual. A ceramic mug sitting beside the sink appeared freshly washed despite the chaotic scene Melissa described that night. Nearby trash bags contained paper towels with traces of mud matching soil from the creek area outside town. Separately, the details seemed minor. Together, they raised serious questions about whether the disappearance had been staged after the fact. Meanwhile, forensic teams examined Melissa's vehicle, an older silver sedan parked in the driveway. Detectives initially believed the car had not been used during the storm because Melissa claimed she never left the house. However, closer examination revealed damp leaves trapped beneath the tires and fine traces of dirt embedded in the floor mats. Laboratory analysis later showed similarities between the debris found in the car and material collected near the wooded creek. Investigators began quietly building a timeline suggesting the vehicle may have traveled there during the night. As pressure increased, detectives expanded their interviews with people who knew Melissa personally. Friends described her as increasingly overwhelmed during the past year. One former co-worker recalled Melissa complaining constantly about financial problems and exhaustion. Another neighbor remembered hearing loud arguments coming from the house late at night, though no one could clearly identify what was being said. A relative revealed that Melissa had recently spoken about feeling trapped and unable to escape the responsibilities in her life. While none of these statements proved wrongdoing, they painted a troubling picture of a woman under severe emotional strain. The investigation took another significant turn when detectives reviewed security footage from a gas station located several miles from the creek. The grainy video, recorded shortly before midnight during the storm, showed a silver sedan matching Melissa's vehicle driving along the highway heading toward the wooded area. Although heavy rain obscured the license plate, investigators believed the timing aligned too closely with their developing theory to ignore. When confronted about the footage during another interview, Melissa became defensive for the first time. She claimed detectives were twisting facts and unfairly targeting a grieving mother. But investigators noticed her confidence beginning to crack. Over the next 2 days, forensic analysts completed additional examinations inside the Harper home. Subtle evidence suggested portions of the living room had been cleaned recently despite Melissa insisting nothing unusual occurred before Noah vanished. Detectives also found inconsistencies involving the back door she claimed had been left open by an intruder. There were no signs of forced entry, damaged locks, or footprints nearby despite the heavy rain and muddy ground outside. Investigators increasingly believed the scene had been arranged to support a false kidnapping narrative. As public concern intensified, rumors spread rapidly throughout Ashford Ridge. Residents gathered in coffee shops and grocery store parking lots discussing the case in hushed voices. Many people refused to believe Melissa could be involved. Others quietly admitted something had felt wrong from the beginning. Parents hugged their children tighter at school pickup lines, while local churches organized vigils for Noah. His smiling school photograph appeared on candles, posters, and ribbons placed across town. The tragedy weighed heavily on the community, especially because so many residents had personally known the cheerful 6-year-old boy. Behind closed doors, investigators prepared for a critical interview. Detective Reeves believed Melissa was hiding something significant, but he also understood that confronting her too aggressively too soon could end the conversation entirely. Instead, detectives planned a careful strategy designed to expose contradictions gradually. They gathered every timeline discrepancy, forensic result, and witness statement into a detailed case file. Hours before the next interrogation began, Reeves reportedly told another investigator, "The truth is already here. She's just trying to stay ahead of it." That evening, Melissa arrived at the station appearing exhausted and emotionally drained. Dark circles surrounded her eyes, and her hands trembled slightly as detectives escorted her into the interview room. What began as another routine conversation would soon become the moment the entire investigation changed direction. Because for the first time since Noah's disappearance, investigators were prepared to reveal evidence Melissa never expected them to uncover. The interrogation room inside the Ashford Ridge Police Department felt cold and painfully quiet. A small recording camera blinked from the corner of the ceiling while Detective Daniel Reeves sat across from Melissa Harper, with a thick case file resting on the table between them. Outside the room, investigators monitored every word through a glass observation window. For nearly an hour, Reeves spoke calmly, asking Melissa to repeat the events of the stormy night once again. At first, she answered with the same carefully practiced version of events she had given before. She claimed she fell asleep on the couch, woke up after hearing thunder, and discovered Noah missing. But this time, detectives began presenting details one piece at a time, slowly dismantling the story she had relied on since the beginning. Reeves first mentioned the security footage showing a vehicle matching hers driving toward the wooded creek shortly before midnight. Melissa immediately denied it was her car. Then detectives revealed forensic findings linking mud and plant material from the creek area directly to her vehicle's tires and floor mats. Her breathing became uneven. She crossed her arms tightly and avoided eye contact. Still, she continued insisting investigators were making terrible assumptions. Reeves remained patient. He spoke softly and methodically, laying out every contradiction without raising his voice. Experienced investigators understood that pressure did not always come from shouting. Sometimes the quiet presentation of undeniable facts was far more powerful. As the interview continued late into the night, Melissa's emotional state began visibly deteriorating. Detectives pointed out the absence of forced entry at the home, the cleaned areas inside the living room, and the inconsistencies in her timeline. Reeves explained that no evidence supported the idea of a stranger entering during the storm. He then placed a photograph of Noah on the table. For several seconds, Melissa stared silently at the image of her smiling 6-year-old son wearing his favorite red jacket at a school carnival only weeks earlier. Witnesses later said the room fell completely silent except for the faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Then came the moment investigators had been waiting for. Reeves quietly explained that forensic experts believed Noah had died inside the home before being transported to the creek area. Melissa's composure collapsed almost instantly. Tears streamed down her face as she buried her hands over her eyes. Her breathing turned shaky and uneven. At first, she repeatedly whispered that she never meant for things to happen this way. Detectives remained calm, allowing long stretches of silence while she struggled emotionally. Eventually, fragments of the truth began emerging piece by piece. Melissa admitted that mounting financial pressure, emotional exhaustion, and growing isolation had pushed her into a severe mental and emotional crisis. According to her statement, the evening began with an argument after Noah accidentally damaged an important stack of unpaid paperwork she had left on the kitchen table. Investigators later clarified that there was no evidence of long-term abuse inside the home, but they believed the situation escalated tragically during a moment of emotional instability and panic. Melissa described becoming overwhelmed and losing control during the confrontation. What followed resulted in Noah suffering fatal injuries inside the house. Instead of immediately contacting emergency services, Melissa panicked. Terrified of the consequences and desperate to protect the carefully constructed image she showed the world, she made a series of devastating decisions throughout the night. Investigators believed she attempted to create the appearance of a kidnapping by moving evidence, cleaning parts of the home, and later transporting Noah to the Wooded Creek area during the storm. Detectives said the heavy rain likely influenced her decision because she believed it would destroy forensic evidence and make investigators think Noah had wandered away or been taken by someone else. The confession sent shockwaves across Ashford Ridge. Residents who had spent days searching for Noah struggled to comprehend the heartbreaking truth. Vigils held throughout town became scenes of grief and disbelief as parents embraced their children, and cried openly beneath candlelight. Teachers from Noah's elementary school placed flowers, drawings, and handwritten notes outside the playground where he once laughed with classmates. Many residents described feeling emotionally shattered not only by the loss of a child, but by the realization that the danger had existed inside the very home where he should have been safest. National media soon descended upon the small Ohio town, transforming quiet streets into crowded rows of satellite trucks and reporters. Yet despite intense public attention, investigators emphasized that the case reflected a deeply tragic family crisis rather than a mystery involving strangers or organized violence. Community leaders encouraged residents to avoid spreading rumors and instead focus on supporting grieving children and families affected by the tragedy. Counselors were brought into Noah's school to help students process the shocking events in a safe and age-appropriate way. Weeks later, during a court appearance held under heavy security, Melissa Harper appeared dramatically different from the composed suburban mother neighbors once recognized. She spoke very little while prosecutors outlined the investigation in detail before the courtroom. Detectives described the carefully staged disappearance, the forensic evidence linking the home and vehicle to the creek, and the confession that ultimately revealed what happened during the stormy night. Throughout the hearing, Noah's relatives sat quietly in the front row holding photographs of the smiling 6-year-old boy whose life had ended far too soon. In the months that followed, the tragedy left a permanent scar on Ashford Ridge. Parents became more attentive to signs of emotional distress within families, schools expanded counseling programs, and local organizations increased support resources for struggling single parents facing financial or emotional hardship. Detective Reeves later reflected during a press interview that the case served as a painful reminder that serious emotional crises can remain hidden behind ordinary suburban routines until it is too late. Though the headlines eventually faded and television crews disappeared, the memory of Noah Harper remained deeply woven into the town's identity. His classmates planted a small tree near the elementary school playground in his honor, and every spring residents gathered quietly beneath its growing branches to remember the cheerful little boy who once chased fireflies on warm Ohio evenings. The case that initially appeared to be a terrifying abduction had ultimately revealed something far more heartbreaking, a tragedy born from concealed emotional collapse, panic, and irreversible choices that forever changed an entire community.